Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, our guest is Chris Cowan, and Chris is recognised internationally for his vast network of private and public partnerships and his expansive policing knowledge from 30 years in law enforcement. So Chris's extensive experience leading special operations, homeland security, crime suppression, professional development, community policing, media relations, and business and community crime prevention units has given him a unique perspective on what it takes to be a guardian to our communities. And commissioned as a United States naval officer, he secured his bachelor's degree in political science. He's also earned a master's certificate from the Australian Institute of Police Management, and he's also earned a graduate certificate from the US Department of Homeland Security Leadership Institute. And he's also a graduate of the South Carolina Executive Institute, the FBI National Academy, the FBI Command College, and the FBI Hazardous Devices School Executive Management Program. So he has over 19 years of leadership experience in the fields of administration, human capital, crisis management, strategic planning, tactical operations, homeland security, community policing, and local and state government affairs. Now, Chris has worked internationally with the London Metropolitan Police, the Staffordshire England Police, Queensland Police Service Australia, and the Australian Federal Police. He's worked with the Hong Kong Police, Bulgarian Police Service, and I can't really, Reinhard Poliski, you have to correct me if I pronounce that wrong, Chris, and nationally with the Los Angeles Police Department, New York Police Department, and North Carolina Justice Academy for the purpose of developing policing programs and initiatives. So after serving as a deputy chief for the Richland County Sheriff's Department, which was a 960-person department, he continues to work with local, state, and federal partners in South Carolina and across the globe in developing law enforcement, professional development, and community-based initiatives. Now, Chris's passion is holistic policing strategies to provide stability to all citizens and protect the vulnerable, through programs that create religious, business, and neighbourhood crime prevention. And in October 21, he was honoured to be named the chief of the newly formed Cayce Police Department, where they strive to foster community partnerships while relentlessly pursuing the criminal element that threatens the quality of life and safety for all their citizens and communities. So we've got a great guest for you today, and I'd like to welcome right now Chris Cowan. Hi, Chris.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Pretty impressive little bio there. You've done a fair bit of stuff.
I've been very blessed with a lot of opportunity and learned along the way, continue to learn every day. That's what it's all about, is learning new ways and better ways to do things and realizing I'm never the smartest person in the room.
I heard something once that stuck with me, and it said, if you are the smartest person in the room, find a new room.
Absolutely.
Right?
Totally
To try and, push yourself. And so you've been in leadership, and leadership is about serving. So what do you think is important for people to understand, or why is it important for people to understand the importance of being significant to others, do you think?
Well, I think we always talk about being successful, and we always talk about, bringing, the mission home and the vision home, and, always having a purpose, and always, checking the boxes, and always, accomplishing great things and doing great things. And that's very important. I think there's a difference between success and significance, but I think you can do both. And I think it's important to do both. But I think the significant side of it is not where your purpose is, but it's where your passion is. And I think that's the differentiation between, what we're talking about, what you and I have talked about, through email and in other forums. And I think we've got to identify how we challenge ourselves, how we challenge others, how we extend ourselves, how we extend others. How do we draw the positives out of other people and ourselves, and that significance, and creating those significant opportunities. And I think oftentimes we forget about the little moments, the micro moments, the macro moments, and all those times when we make contact with people, and we think it's just a minor thing, it's not a big deal, but every
Yep.
single interaction means something to somebody.
Yeah. And I remember, some teachers, one thing they said stuck with me, and then that ended up driving me forward. And I had myself personally, there was a superintendent where I worked, and he suggested that I go to university. And I'm like, oh, I don't think I have the capabilities of that. And he pushed me, and I'm now 2 degrees in and doing a master's, right? So this
Wow.
young girl that had no tertiary education in her family and thought that I didn't have enough to give to that. If it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd be the person I am today. And it was just one conversation that pushed me to do that.
We could all probably identify 100 people throughout our lives that said something or did something that kind of pushed us into one direction or another. So I often challenge myself, and I ask other people constantly, is what are you doing to extend others? Extend their quality of life, extending their happiness, extending their growth, extending their purpose and their passion. What are we doing to basically what we're talking about is like a rubber band, and how are we stretching that out and drawing people out and making them better for themselves and for other people, because you don't know what baggage people have when you're interacting with them. Victim, suspect, citizen, business partner, you list the whole gamut. Your partner at home. I mean, all of that collectively comes together to thinking about that one moment where you're interacting with somebody, and you really, if you step back and you think, how I just interacted with that person could have changed their life in a positive way or a negative way.
Yeah. And so who are your mentors and coaches, and how did you know they were the right people to fit those roles in your life?
Well, okay, so I've got several, and Wade Fuller in the Queensland Police Service is a huge mentor, coach, friend, but one of my best friends. He does a lot for me. Paul Butler was another individual that extends me in so many different ways. Josh Waters is another friend of mine, and the thing is, the thing that identifies these people as friends are because they're honest with me, and because they're direct with me, and they're holding me accountable. They're my accountability partner. What are they doing they're never, when they're with me, they're not, I call it coaching the ghost. And I'm sure somebody else has coined that phrase. And I think maybe it was actually Wade Fuller, one of my coaches, one of my mentors, who told me that and said, are you actually in the moment with the person? Or are you coaching the problem, the thing that exists maybe in the far reaches and beyond? Sheriff Leon Lott was somebody I worked for I worked with the Sheriff's Department for 29 years and has been a mentor and a coach and a friend, and somebody that has always been honest with me and smacked me on the back of the head with a 2x4 when I needed to be, but then also giving me a hug when I needed to, and told me it was important for you to do this or do that, or don't do this or don't do that. These are the things that are perceptually coming across, and these are the things you have to hold yourself accountable to. And I think oftentimes we choose a mentor, we choose a coach that we think is the right person because of their qualifications and because of their resume. That's not what makes a good coach. A good coach is an accountability partner. It is somebody that is going to question you at every turn and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Did you think of this? And they're going to ask you questions. You're going to ask them questions, and you're going to wait for the answer, and you're going to hope that they tell you all the answers and solve all your problems. And a coach doesn't do that. A coach does not do that. They don't give you the answer. You have the answer. Just have to draw it out. So, I think that, in my life, I've got many, many people that I respect, many people that I call an associate and I call a friend, but people that you call a coach and you call a mentor are the people that you can count on at 3:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the afternoon, that are going to be there at a moment's notice. But more importantly, when you have a problem, personally or professionally, they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to be direct with you, and they're going to be clear, and they're going to be concise, and they're going to help you expand. They're going to help you get out of your comfort zone, be elastic, and say, okay, what am I going to do to better myself, and what am I going to do to better others?
Yeah, and not sugarcoat things, right? Like, you've got your friends that when you want to have a prop up and you need an ego you can go to them, but you also need those people in your life that are just going to be brutally honest, right?
I don't need, excuse the expression, I don't want to be stroked. I don't need to be stroked. That's not what I'm looking for. I don't want to be in it. If you're in it for yourself, then that's what you're looking for. You're looking for your ego to be stroked, what you just said.
Mm.
But if you're in it for others and you're in it for service above self, if you're truly, truly in it for those reasons, then you want to be. I think there's an expression. It's a hand out or a hand up. And we
Yeah.
often talk about people in the community that need help, and are they looking for a hand up or a hand out? Well, I don't think coaching is any different than that. I don't think that mentoring is any different than that, because you're looking for somebody to reach out and pull you up to your potential and help you dig down inside of you. And you're not looking for a handout. A handout is somebody that's going to stroke you,
Mm.
that's going to say, "Oh, good boy, you did such a good job," when you didn't. You didn't. Be honest and tell people. When you go speak in front of a group, the sheriff, one of my mentors, loves to tell a joke about this little boy that stood in the back of the room when he heard me speak one time. And the little boy walked up to me afterwards and he handed me a quarter. And I looked at him, I said, "Well, why?" This was a joke, obviously. And I looked at him and I said, "Why do you need that quarter?" And, well, my daddy said he was the poorest speaker that I'd ever heard, so he needed a quarter. And so it's kind of one of those things, so honest, and
Yeah.
it's just, anyway. So I think that what you got to ask yourself is how are you challenging yourself and who is challenging you?
Mm.
And I think that's one of the things that we really have to surround ourselves with, people that are going to challenge us. But more importantly, we have to surround ourselves with people that are willing to be challenged themselves, and that are going to bring greater, value to the situation.
Mm. That's a really good point. I've in the last couple of weeks, I've actually had the experience of people that I thought that I was helping by challenging them, but I've ended up triggering them, right? And kind of now I've got to work on mending some relationships. So they're not completely discounted, but they're not as
Sure.
strong as what they were. So you're right. It's not the people need it as well, right? We need to surround ourselves with those people, because that's when we can serve at our highest level. Or we have to adapt and make sure that the delivery of the message isn't going to trigger them, because some people aren't as brutally honest as us and love that accountability, right? They like
Right.
it to be cushioned on the way up rather than just ripped up,
It's kind of like that cartoon picture of the husband and the wife is getting dressed for dinner, and they're getting ready to go out on a date, and the wife turns over her shoulder and says, "How do these pants look on me?" And the husband, there's one bubble that pops up and says, "Well, should I answer honestly, or should I, what kind of evening do I want to have?"
Yeah.
And listen, I think as a friend, as a mentor, as a leader, as a steward of our community, and a steward of others, I believe God put us here for a reason, and every door is open. Every wall is a door, and every door is an opportunity.
Mm.
And if you're really a steward, then you're going to take that opportunity to be significant for others, and
Mm.
and you're going to try to draw them out and expand their personally and professionally, and make their day brighter, make their life brighter, and make it more valued.
Mm. Mm. And so when we're looking at that, I mean, some of us are hardwired in particular ways to either
Yeah.
be triggered or respond. So when you talk about your own hardwiring, how's that impacted your awareness to and of others?
Well, it's interesting that you use the term hardwired. So, a good friend of mine, Don Jenkins, does a leadership program called Hardwire, and there were several of us at the sheriff's department. We went through it together, and one of the things, and it was a couple of years ago, and it was kind of a transformational thing for me, because it really dug down deep into exactly how you're wired. But you talk about emotional intelligence and understanding our compassion and for ourselves and for others. But the question you have to ask yourself is, my wiring, my chemicals, all of the things that go on inside, the cortisones and all those different scientific things that are way over my head, all
Yeah.
those things that happen in our bodies, we have to understand how we react to them.
Mm.
And, if we don't understand how we react to ourselves and to other people, then we can simply not be a good leader, in my opinion, nor can we be a good provider for our team.
Mm.
And it's important for us to provide for ourselves while providing for others. And we do that through understanding how we're wired, how we're going to react to the situation. When somebody says something or does something, or doesn't do something, or doesn't say something, how is our body going to react to it? I use this as an example. When we carry OC in the United States, we have to be sprayed with it before we can carry it on the street, because we want to know how our bodies are going to react.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we get sprayed with it. Well, once we do that, we know that when it hits us, because it hits everyone differently.
Yes.
Well, how you get hit and how you handle it and how you react to it is so that because when you spray it, there's going to be a residual that's going to hit you most of the time.
Mm.
No different than your hardwire. How are your chemicals going to react in your body? How is your brain? How is your heart going to react to what somebody says or what they do? And so I think leadership is about emotional intelligence is the same way. It's all the balance of understanding all of that. And you really need to take a self-assessment. And in my humble opinion, you don't necessarily have to take a test to find those things out. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes every day. There's in the last 2 months, there's probably 20 different things I wish I had reacted to differently or wish I had done differently. Today, there's probably 3 or 4 things that I wish I had done differently. But I do that with the understanding that I know how I'm wired. And I know that I need to go back and mend some of those fences, or I need to fix those things, or I need to change maybe the decision that I made.
And I think it's that self-awareness is so important. And we talk about emotional intelligence, and that does form a big part of it. But it's that self-awareness to know, okay, this is going to trigger me. How can I reduce the trigger? Or my big thing I like to do is reframing, right?
Yes.
How we frame something is going to be how then that's the underlying reason on how we react to it. So if we see, say, difficult conversations, we're calling them difficult conversations. We're seeing them as being difficult, right? But if we can change up the wording even just as a minimum and call them effective communications or courageous communications or whatever connects with us, that alone changes the chemicals in our mind because it's changing the way we're framed about it. So we could probably do a whole podcast just on that, I reckon. That's a really big passion of mine. And I think it's something that I can see and do quite easily. And when I'm working with people, it's one of the things that gets the best results, you know, for them to be able to flip things and go, hang on, there's multiple ways I can see it. I want to choose how I see it rather than actually be forced into it from my hard wiring.
You know, and a lot of, I don't know if other people use this as an example, but I've something that I've thought of recently is that, you know, when you go to a psychologist or a sociologist to kind of really dig deep into things, one of the things that, you know, you see a lot of times is that they use word association. And I'm not a psychologist. I never would assume that I understand completely why they do that. But my humble opinion is that I think one of the reasons that they do that is because they're trying to find out how you're wired.
Yes.
How are you going to react to those things? So why don't we do that to ourselves? Why don't we take moments in time and reflect? And one of the things that I learned from Australia, I think has done very, very well, and I noticed it in other countries is journals, is keeping a journal of your conversations with people. You know, and quite honestly, I think that it's imperative that we do that we go back and we assess our conversations, and then we do a little word association. Well, these were the 5 main points of what was talked about. And this is how I reacted, and this is how I changed the dynamic of the conversation, of the success or the significance or the failure of what just occurred. So that word association could be very powerful, even if we're just looking at understanding how we're wired. But, you know, the hardwired testing that's out there, it defines who you are very factually and very appropriately. And you, in my opinion, if you're really wanting to be a good leader, if you want to be a great leader, if you want to be a better leader, you will spend the time to identify how you're wired and how you react to things. But more importantly, you'll ask other people your reality, their perception, right? They perceive what, and you're, you know, up here and in here, you're thinking this is the reality. Well, in actuality, the perception's over there. And unfortunately, I fail at that a lot. You know, I think that I've said something and I think I've got the message along in a good way. And then I realized when I asked the question, it was way over in left field. And I always feel guilty. I always feel bad about that. And I try to get better about that every day. You know, I think that's one of my weak points is thinking that I communicated things in one way and, you know, came across in a different way.
And I love this, like, introspection, you know, looking inward and just seeing what we bring to the table. And I think, in my opinion, usually that can come, or not usually, but sometimes that can come from obstacles that we faced and, you know, issues that we've come across. So could you share with us possibly what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome and how did that strengthen your connection inward?
Well, I think the big thing is we all have different filters, right? We grew up in different areas of the world, different areas of the country, you know, in different ways with different upbringing. So those filters that we see things through, you know, change our perspective on things in so many different ways. Those difficult situations that we've all been exposed to in the years of our careers or the years of our lives do tremendously change our how we're wired. And I think, some of the difficult things for me is, personally, one of my biggest failures as a leader over the years is I was very transactional. I was very, mission oriented and very much a box checker. And I've tried to get better and tried to improve on that. One of the other big failures, I've got a whole list of failures I can list out for you if you'd like them all, or you can just tell me to
How long
stop
have we
now.
got?
Yeah. But one of the other ones is that I work at a very fast pace, and I like that pace, and I don't slow down. And I often believe that, I don't think that I'm up here by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think I'm better than anybody, but I operate at this level, let's say the 30,000 foot level. And there's some people that are very content with being at 25,000 foot level. Well, I'm wired. Well, I want people to come up to 30,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
I have to understand that some people stay at that level and they're very happy and they're very content and they do very good work. They're very successful and they're significant where they are. But I get frustrated with that. I want everybody to come alongside and be willing to work at that pace. And that's a failure on my part. That's unfair for me to do that. I cannot expect people to look at things through the same lens that I do, nor have maybe the same, my kids are grown, and so I have a little different lifestyle than maybe other people that are working at the 20,000 foot level because of things going on in their life. I have to respect that. I have to honor that. And one of my failures is I often don't do that. So I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have different filters that we see things through. We have different expectations of ourselves that maybe other people don't have, but you cannot inflect what you expect.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgroconsulting.com.au.
And I do that oftentimes. And I catch myself doing that, and I've tried to get better about that. And I've also tried to get better about, being mission oriented and vision oriented as opposed to being people oriented. I want great things, and not for me, but for the community and for the world. And some people say that's a little bit Pollyanna, but I think there's great opportunities. A lot of people are very frustrated with the state of the world right now, the policing state of the world, the commercial state of the world. And I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Do you get to do something, or do you got to do it? And in my opinion, it's all you decide how happy you are about life by making that decision. If you've got to do something, then you've got to look inside and say, okay, what's going on here? And maybe I need to make a change. Or do you get to do something? And is that where your purpose is and your passion and is where you're meant to be? So I think it's a balance there. And again, I could list you out another, 30 or 40, errors of my ways, as they were. I think probably the critical things for me, the big turning points for me have been, we had a 1,000-year flood here. I know Australia has been impacted by floods. That was a turning point in me in my career because of the responsibilities that I had, and the missions and the opportunities that were presented to me to be able to push forward and operation from an operational capacity and really grow from an operations standpoint. And then, we've had officers killed in the line of duty. We had one here in Cayce just a year ago. That was a big turning point for me in how I viewed things and changed, my filter. And so those were some serious leadership challenges. And how do we lead? Do you lead from the front? Do you lead from the middle? Do you lead from behind? And every opportunity, in my opinion, you have to assess that as a leader. And sometimes there's an opportunity to lead from the front. During a flood, I think you lead from the front. I think personally, during a crisis like an officer killed in the line of duty, I think you have to lead from the middle. So I think every situation is different. But those have been some of the big turning points. We had some riots and protests here. Those were some changes in my perspective in leadership and in how I'm wired and how I function and the things that I needed to do to improve my capacity and my capabilities. And so those were some of the challenges that I've had where I was looking at my life and kind of saying, okay, I'm the engineer, right? You're the engineer, the director, the producer, and all these things. And, maybe you need to make some changes on how you're doing those things in order for you to be successful and significant.
And one of the things that Tony Robbins, who I've followed for a long time, was quite instrumental in me growing and getting to the 30,000 feet, right? I was happy sitting at 20, was life happens for you, not to you. And so looking at those adversities as, okay, when we look back in life, we can see a lot of gratitude for things that at the time we were doing the whole, woe me, sitting in that space. So is there anything that you can think of, a couple of things where you've had something go wrong like that, but then later on you've gone, gee, that actually blessed me in some way?
Did you want to take a whole hour to talk about the things that went wrong?
Yeah, why not? maybe go for 2 or 3.
I think there's a lot of things that we all look at that have gone wrong that we say, we wish we had handled them differently. Whether it's a moment in time or whether it's an hour or maybe a week where there were a lot of things going on. I personally and professionally, relationally, I think probably relationally is establishing those relationships to get people to understand. And I think one of the things that I've tried to do, especially recently, is getting people to outside of their comfort zone, but then the failure on my part was accepting the fact that they didn't want to step outside their comfort zone, that they didn't want things to change operationally, capacity, capability. They wanted the status quo, and they didn't want to be held accountable or responsible for their actions. And I think I let that continue too long. And I think in looking at the team as a whole, I think letting them continue to ride in that space in hopes that they would come alongside was in a learning curve, was realizing that was hurting the team. And that, they see that in incapability for people to be held responsible and accountable as a leadership failure, because they are being held accountable and they are being responsible and they are making things click and they're really being successful and significant. And then they see these people over, so I think that, I think that was a failure recently among, some other things where, I think that I try to look introspectively at everything that goes on around me and realize that, we often take our professional and our personal baggage out on our personal support system.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of stressors in life. I like to think of us as corporate athletes. And I know somebody else has coined that phrase, and I don't want to say that I invented that, but I like to use that terminology because I think that we have to hydrate our minds, our bodies, and our soul in order for us to be on the field of battle. And it doesn't matter what widget you're selling, whether it's crime prevention or whether that's coal mining or whether that's, Burlington or whatever company is out there. And I think that we oftentimes we don't hydrate our minds, our body, and our soul through eating right, sleeping right, reading correctly, spiritually getting replenished, researching and educating ourselves and improving our capacity to compete, right? And so I think that oftentimes I neglect that in my own life, where oftentimes I get so much of that 30,000 feet, I try to take myself to that 40,000 foot level. But in order to do that, the plane has to come back down, and it has to be refueled. I think we don't do that for ourselves. And I think we have to do a better job. Personally, I think I need to do a better job. I used to read a lot, and probably in the last couple of months, I haven't done much reading.
Okay.
And so that, I think, is a failure on my part, because that's one of the ways that I'm not rehydrating myself in some way. So I think that's a failure on my part too. I need to do a better job of really spending more in-depth time doing some more research and education. It just makes you stronger. It makes you better. That was one of the things that several of my mentors, especially Sheriff Ott, he was one of the constantly reading, constantly educating himself. And I think that's up till a couple of months ago, I was doing a lot of that, and I haven't recently. And I think it's, for whatever reason, but I think it's a failure on my part.
Yeah, and I'm really driven like that as well. You know, I'm always looking for how I can expand my mind. And I think I got to the point, I think they call it stupid mountain, you know, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You get right up to the top of this peak and you think you know it all, right? And you're like, yes, I've got all this. Look at me. I'm just, you know, I'm all this wealth of knowledge. And then something else happens and you slide back down and you go, you know what? The more I know, the more I realize I don't know,
Don't
you know,
know.
and
Right.
then you come back up and your confidence increases again. And I love the feeling of, you know, doing all of this learning, but also now in my space that I'm in, being humble enough to know that this is just like a little drop
Yeah.
in the world of knowledge that's out there. And I'm just so hungry. I don't think I'm going to have enough time in my lifetime though to get everything I want in this brain, you know?
Just don't stop doing it, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think that, you know, to your point, I think that's probably one of the ways that I've kind of deviated maybe off of this rehydration of that I try to preach to everybody that I can is every day you have to take the time for yourself. You have to make sure
Mm.
that you're taking the time to grow, you know, in whatever way possible. And I think that we often make the mistake, you know, I've been critical of myself recently where, you know, normally I get up in the morning and I don't look at my emails and I don't look at my, you know, text and phone or whatever until I've had an opportunity to do some, you know, spiritual work, you know, connecting
Yep.
with God.
That's actually a really good point to go into because I also have, you know, the way I connect with myself, I believe is connecting with God, and everyone has their own way of strengthening that connection with inner self or connection with God. Can you tell me some of your like daily practices or weekly practices that you do to make sure you keep that connection strong?
Yeah. So every day I get an email, Our Daily Bread.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think they're writing it about me every day. So they need to stop doing
It's
that.
really relative. Yeah.
It's really relative. It's kind of like when you go to church and you're sitting in there, a synagogue, and you're sitting there and they're talking and you're like, why are you talking directly to me? Right. Yeah. But I spend, you know, I read that every morning. I listen to either listen to classical music or I listen to Christian music. I don't necessarily listen to the words as much as I am listening to the rhythm of it and
Yeah.
just trying to, you know, get my mind wrapped around the things that I've got going on. I exercise. My wife and I actually get out and exercise every morning
Yep.
together, and we walk. And you know, it's just an opportunity to just, you know, just be in the space and you know, just kind of spend that time. You know, one of the other, I love to ride my bike. I love to do some, you know, do some workouts and things like that. But that spiritual moments, you know, and it doesn't have to be long, you know,
Mm,
it just has to be committed. And what's the quality of that time? 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, you know, it doesn't have to be an hour, you know,
no.
you know, but we have to take the time for that to make that connection. And then the other thing is trying to make decisions and make those, you know, biblical decisions. You know, what would, you know, and you know, those doors that open in front of us. And you know, people often ask me, you know, where are you going to be in 3 years? Where are you going to be in 5 years? I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 minutes because you
Yeah.
don't know what door God's going to open until you to walk through that you don't expect, right?
Yeah.
So you have to stay connected with that to understand and hear the signs of what's going on around you so that you can walk through those doors. And it may be to help somebody, it may be to
Mm,
save somebody. So I think you know, we have to make that connectivity, but you have to set that time aside. And
yeah.
it's very hard to do in this fast-paced world of the cell phones and emails and texts and Instagram and, you know, Snapchats and, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn. And I mean, it's just the list goes on and on and on. If you don't carve out that time, you're gonna fail yourself and you're gonna fail your family, which are the two most important things.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we talk about being at 30,000 feet, you know, without doing that, we're going to have wing problems and engine problems, and we're not going to be able to sustain at 30,000 feet, right?
That's right. I would mention the other thing. So a buddy of mine taught me this, and it's the term rare air, right? You and I operate at the 30,000 foot level. Well, rare air is at 50,000 feet. There's
Mm,
very few planes that really operate at that level, right?
mm,
Well, that
mm,
rare air is what I qualify as significance.
mm.
And taking people, when you interact with people like you and I are interacting now, your smile, your intelligence, your just the whole thing, it's taking me to that 50,000 foot level. I feel like I can move there, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very rare. Not everybody makes you feel that way.
Mm,
So what you have to ask yourself is when you interact with people for 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 hours, whatever it is, what are you doing to take them to rare air? What are you
yeah. I
doing to
love
make
that.
them feel like you can elevate them to that level? And that's an awesome feeling to think that you left somebody there in rare space where nobody else took them before, right? So I think we have to kind of, we have to look at ourselves and say that 30,000 foot level, if you want to operate there, knock yourself out. I'm there, you're there. We're going to continue to do that. But what are you going to do to try to move people to that rare air? I read a quote the other day, and this was Dennis Gillum as a guy that is a speaker in the U.S. I actually went to church with him for a little while. He talks about suicide tragedies that have occurred in his life, his brothers. And it's just tragic. But one of the things he said the other day was a semicolon is used when an author could have chosen to end their sentence. They could have ended it, but they put a semicolon, but they chose not to. The author is you and the sentence is your life. It's okay to pause, but don't stop. And he's talking about suicide prevention. And I think that's imperative that we talk about it, because it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to not do anything about it. But I think you take that quote and you move it to leadership, move it to interaction with people every day. Your life is not a period, it's a semicolon. And how are you interacting? I just think that's really exciting. I was really impressed when he said that, because it made me think about, so maybe I'm doing a little bit of reading. I didn't realize it.
I think when you're at 30,000 feet as well, we tend to not always give ourselves credit for what we're actually doing, because our expectations are here. We're probably just here and we're going, oh, I'm not doing as well as I could be. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, right?
Well, you tried to point out all my faults, so there,
okay. I've opened the can of worms, right?
I wanted to mention to you something else. You sparked something in when you sent me an email and you were asking me some questions, and one of the things that I thought about was Cayce Glick, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Army Ranger. One of the things that he told me a long time ago was to hunt the good. And I love the expression. I love hunting dogs and I love working with them, and rewarding that good behavior. When you're training a dog, you reward the good behavior, because that's what they're going to repeat. And I think his expression was that he's not saying that people are dogs, but in my mind, I'm thinking that if we reward good behavior, that's what our team, that's what our friends, that's what our family, that's what they're going to repeat. But if we acknowledge the bad, then so you want to hunt the good in everyone. And if we want to take people to that rare air, the more we hunt that good, the more that they're going to move that they're going to want to be pulled alongside, and they're going to want to move to that rare air. So,
and I love that. And that kind of is the ethos of everything that sort of makes me who I am, because I think that everything that is bad is really good. It might have a shell you have to crack open. It might be something you have to unwrap, but God gives us everything that we need. And I look at myself now, and I've got a range of things that I could come up that were obstacles in my life, but every one of them led me to just this conversation, right? And what I'm getting out of this conversation, you mentioned you were, and how many listeners as well this could actually impact and create meaningful change for, was all down to me having to go through something that I didn't really like at the time, but became a blessing, afterwards.
You're talking about Jeff Stewart. There's that obstacle that you had to come through to get to me. Is that what you're saying?
I hope you're listening to this, Jeff. Well, he hasn't sent me an Eagles jumper yet, so we're still friends.
But I totally agree with you, and I think that's the thing. Like you said, that God brings. I believe in divine intervention. I think that every person is brought into your life for a reason, and to get you to what God's path is and what God's direction is for you. And I think that what we have to do is we have to listen to that and filter through that. And if you hunt the good in every situation, and I use the example, I had a person that worked with me. She was having some trouble, and there were like 5 layers of supervision between her and I, and they had all tried to work with her on she's coming to work late. She wasn't showing up. She was having, challenges, blah, blah, blah. And she came to talk to me because they couldn't get through to her. Right. And so she came, we talked for 45 minutes. Well, the JC was talking, Lieutenant Colonel Glick was talking to the back of my mind, hunt the good. So I thought, I'm not even going to talk to her about what's been going on that's wrong. We just talked about all the stuff that the great was going on, blah, blah, blah. Well, I said, listen, I got another meeting. I hate to cut this short. If you want to come back, we can talk again later. We can have another meeting. I love talking with you. You're a great asset to the team. So she gets up to leave and she says, well, Chief, weren't we supposed to talk about? I said, no, I don't want you to repeat that behavior. Let's not even talk about that. Let's just keep focused. And from that point forward, she was doing great things. And, that wasn't me. That was somebody else that suggested to me a behavioral opportunity to try something, and it worked. So hunt the good in every situation, because they're going to repeat that behavior. If you acknowledge the good, that's what they're going to want. That's what they're going to want to get rewarded for.
Well, we all have, one of my other little things I talk about a lot is enoughness, right? We all have this enoughness that we're looking for. And when we feel enough, that encourages us to move forward, right? So when someone is feeling like that and they're feeling down, by bringing them up and showing them what they can do to be enough, it just encourages them to move forward that way.
Have you ever heard the expression that, we talk about the glass is half full, the glass is half empty, scenario? I think it was Wade that one of the things that he was telling me, remembering that it's easier to break the glass than it is to make the glass.
Yeah.
So I think that goes to what you're talking about from the standpoint of what are you building? What are you creating? What do you, instead of, we're always trying to get in there and we're trying to, break the glass, and we're trying to make things, better. We're trying to shake things up. Well, building people up, building that glass, and I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I have really loved having a chat with you. This has just been fantastic, and I'm really glad that you said yes. So, for the listeners out there, we kind of met on a leadership forum, and kind of some of our ideas joined in, and sometimes we need to take those steps, right? We're just reaching out to someone and just connecting can lead to other opportunities that we have no realization about. And kudos, as much as we, make fun of him and poke fun, kudos to Jeff, because he's instrumental in us getting together. But
he's doing great things.
He's doing some amazing things. And I think it's that coming into that space again of wanting to serve others more than needing to serve self. And that's what I think builds good leadership. So if people wanted to reach out to you and, try and get from 30,000 to 50,000 or whatever it is, where can they find you? How can people get it?
My hope is that they'll disagree with something that I've said, and they'll reach out and they'll say, hey, I didn't agree. And have you thought about this? Because that's how we learn.
Love it. Yeah.
But you can stalk me. I mean, find me on LinkedIn, Facebook. You can reach out to me by email, phone call, whatever. I think it's always, that's what the benefit is of these relationships that we establish through Jeff Stewart, Jeff Stewarts of the world, the Phil Shepherds of the world, all these different people that have been mentors in our lives. Reach out, connect, communicate. One of the things that after Jeff's segment that we did was some of the guys and gals, we started reaching out to each other, and we started challenging each other with questions, just posing questions to each other. And so, for example, one of the questions that I asked was, if there was one thing about your leadership that you would change, that would change what you're doing today, what would that one thing be? And in asking the question, I started thinking about it myself. And then we each started sharing back and forth, and we realized that the things that we would each change were things that we actually wanted to change, but we didn't realize we should. And so we started bouncing these ideas. So do that. Reach out and challenge somebody. Reach out and expand them and draw them out and help somebody. And it doesn't have to be that don't assume that by asking questions that people are going to think that you're being arrogant, or you're going to think you're better than me or whatever. Just ask questions and say, look, I'm asking the question of myself as I'm asking you. So share with me your idea so I can tell you mine, and then maybe we can meet in the middle. But I would also reach out to people and hunt the good, and find the good in what they're doing, and congratulate them and connect and share ideas. So anyway, so people want to get in touch with me, and share ideas. Tell me better ways to do things, man. I'm all about it. Please share. I'm like a sponge. I just want to learn better ways to do things every day.
Well, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes, ma'am. You are absolutely right. Absolutely right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure. Oh, sorry. It's been a pleasure having you on.
I've been excited about it. I appreciate it. I'm very humbled that you'd asked me, and I've learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.